Okay. Hare Krishna, my dear devotees, all DJ. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Today we are hearing from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 26, text number 17. And this verse says, all the women address the king, O master of the citizens. We do not know why your dear wife has taken on this sort of existence. O killer of enemies, kindly look. She is lying on the ground without bedding. We cannot understand why she's acting this way. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. When a person is devoid of devotional service or Vishnu Bhakti, he takes to many sinful activities. King Puranjana left home, neglected his own wife, and engaged himself in killing animals. This is the position of all materialistic men. They do not care for a married chaste wife. They take the wife only as an instrument for sense enjoyment, not as a means for devotional service. To have unrestricted sex life, the karmis work very hard. They have concluded that the best course is to have sex with any woman and simply pay the price for her, as though she were a mercantile commodity. Thus, they engage in their energy working very hard for such material acquisitions. Such materialistic people have lost their good intelligence. They must search out their intelligence within the hearts. That's interesting. They must search out their intelligence within the heart. A person who does not have a chaste wife accepted by religious principles always has a bewildered intelligence. The wife of King Puranjana was lying on the ground because she was neglected by her husband. Actually, the woman must always be protected by her husband. We always speak of the goddess of fortune as being placed on the chest of Narayana. In other words, the wife must remain embraced by her husband. Thus, she becomes beloved and well protected. Just as one saves his money and places it under his own personal protection, one should similarly protect his wife by his own personal supervision. Just as intelligence is always within the heart, so beloved chaste wife should always have her place on the chest of a good husband. This is the proper relationship between husband and wife. A wife is therefore called Ardangani, or half of the body. One cannot remain with only one leg, one hand, or only one side of the body. He must have two sides. Similarly, according to nature's way, husband and wife should live together. In the lower species of life, among birds and animals, it is seen that by nature's arrangement, husband and wife live together. It is similarly ideal in human life for the husband and wife to live together. The home should be a place for devotional service, and the wife should be chaste and accepted by a ritualistic ceremony. In this way, one can become happy at home. Honey bull. Wow, these are all statements written by Srila Prabhupada. So Prabhupada says that his purports are his spiritual ecstasies. so, so Prabhupada knows what it means to have a wife and how to take care of the wife. Okay, so now we'll go to Canto 4, chapter 26, verse number 18. The great sage Narada continued, "My dear King Parsanabhari, as soon as King Puranjana saw his queen lying on the ground, appearing like a mendicant, he immediately became bewildered." Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. In this verse, the word avadutam is especially significant, for it refers to a mendicant who does not take care of his body. Since the queen was lying on the ground without bedding and proper dress, King Puranjana became very much aggrieved. In other words, he repented that he had neglected his intelligence and had engaged himself in the forest in killing animals. In other words, when one's good intelligence is separated or neglected, he fully engages in sinful activities. Due to neglecting one's good intelligence or Krishna consciousness, one becomes bewildered and engages in sinful activities. Upon realizing this, a man becomes repentant. Oh, that's good. Such repentance is described by Narottam Dasa Thakura. Hari Hari Vipale Janama Gonainu Manusya Janmana Paya Radha Krishna Na Bajaya Janya Sunya Visha Kainu. Narottama Dasa Thakura herein says that he repents for having spoiled his human life and knowingly drunk poison. By not being Krishna conscious, one willingly drinks the poison of material life. The purport is that one certainly becomes addicted to sinful activities when he becomes devoid of his good, chaste wife, or when he has lost his good sense and does not take to Krishna consciousness. Okay, text number 19. The king, with a grieved mind, began to speak to his wife with very pleasing words. Although he was filled with regret and tried to pacify her, he could not see any symptom of anger caused by love within the heart of his beloved wife. Ah, interesting. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The king very much regretted having left his queen and having gone to the forests to execute sinful activities. When a person regrets his sinful activities, the abandoning of Krishna consciousness and good intelligence, his path of deliverance from the path of material clutches is open. As stated in Srimad Bhagavatam 5.5.5, Parabhava stavad abodha jato yavan na jidnasata atma tattvam. When a person loses his Krishna consciousness and loses interest in self-realization, he must engage in sinful activities. Wow. All one's activities in a life devoid of Krishna consciousness simply lead to defeat and misuse of one's life. Naturally, one who comes to Krishna consciousness regrets his previous sinful activities in the human form. Only by this process can one be delivered from the clutches of nescience or ignorance in the materialistic life. Well, yeah, when a person loses his Krishna consciousness and loses interest in self-realization, he must engage in sinful activities. All one's activities in a life devoid of Krishna consciousness simply lead to defeat and misuse of one's life. Naturally, one who comes to Krishna consciousness regrets his previous sinful activities in the human form. Only by this process, meaning regretting his previous sinful activities, only by this process can one be delivered from the clutches of nescience or ignorance in materialistic life. Yeah, well, we should feel very bad, very sorry for engaging in sinful activities. And give up those sinful activities and take up Krishna consciousness. Text 20. Because the king was very expert in flattery, oh boy, he began to pacify his queen very slowly. First, he touched her 2 feet, then embraced her nicely, seating her on his lap, and began to speak as follows. One has to awaken his Krishna consciousness by first regretting his past deeds. Well, that's important. Very important. Just as King Puranjana began to flatter his wife, one should, by deliberate consideration, raise himself to the platform of Krishna consciousness. To attain such an end, one must touch the lotus feet of the spiritual master. Krishna consciousness cannot be achieved by self-endeavor. Let's see, now that's an interesting statement. Krishna consciousness cannot be achieved by self-endeavor. One must therefore approach a self-realized Krishna conscious person and touch his lotus feet. Prahlad Maharaj therefore says, Nai sammatis tavad uru kramang grinim sprir sati anartapa gamo yad arta mahiya sampada rajo visakam niskinchananam na rinita yavat. Bhagavatam 7.5.32. One cannot come to the precincts of Krishna consciousness unless he touches the dust of the lotus feet of a person who has become a Mahatma, a great devotee. This is the beginning of the surrendering process. Yeah, he has to touch the lotus feet of a pure devotee. Of course, it's not very good to do that because the pure devotee, when someone touches his lotus feet, they sort of get rid of their sinful activities. but it's not good for the devotee. So many times, a devotee will not let anyone touch his lotus feet. Lord Krishna wants everyone to surrender unto him. And this surrendering process begins when one touches the lotus feet of a bona fide spiritual master. By sincerely rendering service to a bona fide spiritual master, one begins his spiritual life in Krishna consciousness. Touching the lotus feet of a spiritual master means giving up one's false prestige and unnecessarily puffed up position in the material world. Those who remain in the darkness of material existence due to their falsely prestigious position, so-called scientists, philosophers, or actual atheists, well, they do not know the ultimate cause of everything. Although bewildered, they are not ready to surrender themselves to the lotus feet of a person who knows things in their proper perspective. Very important statement. In other words, one cannot arouse Krishna consciousness simply by his own mental speculation. One must surrender to a bona fide spiritual master. Only this process will help one. Text 21. King Puranjana said, "My dear, beautiful wife, when a master accepts a servant as his own man, but does not punish him for his offenses, the servant must be considered unfortunate." Yeah, that means that people who are like servants, they must take the advice of their master and be punished by the master for making mistakes. That way, the servant is educated. According to Vedic civilization, domestic animals and servants are treated exactly like one's own children. Animals and children are sometimes punished, not out of vengeance, but out of love. Similarly, a master sometimes punishes his servants, not out of vengeance, but out of love, to correct him and bring him to the right point. Thus, King Puranjana took his punishment dealt by his wife, the queen, as mercy upon him. He considered himself the most obedient servant of the queen. She was angry at him for his sinful activities. Well, this means she's a good wife. Namely, hunting in the forest and leaving her at home. King Puranjana accepted the punishment as actual love and affection from his wife. In the same way, when a person is punished by the laws of nature, by the will of God, he should not be disturbed. He should not be disturbed. A real devotee thinks in this way. When a devotee is put in an awkward position, he takes it as the mercy of the Supreme Lord. Wow. Tete nukampam samikshamano punjana evatma kritam vipakam. Ritvat vapur bir vidanan namaste. Jiveta yo mukti pade sadayabak. Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th canto, 14th chapter, 8th verse. A very famous verse. This verse says that the devotees accept a reversal of his position in life as a benediction by the Lord, and consequently offers the Lord more obeisances and prayers, thinking that the punishment is due to his past misdeeds, and that the Lord is punishing him very mildly. The punishment awarded, I like that, the punishment awarded by the state or by God for one's own faults is actually for one's benefit. Yes. Mm. In the Manu Samhita, it is said that the king should be considered merciful when he condemns a murderer to death. Okay, there it is. Capital punishment is a good thing. It's not these wimpy nonsense people that reject capital punishments. It is said that the king should be considered merciful when he condemns a murderer to death, because a murderer punished in this life becomes freed from his sinful activity, and in the next life takes birth cleared of all sins. Okay, so that's the best argument for capital punishment. Look up capital punishment. If one accepts punishment as a reward dealt by the master, he becomes intelligent enough to not commit the same mistake again. Okay, so that's why there should be severe punishment for sinful activities. What does it say about capital punishment?
Capital punishment, also known as death penalty, is the state-sanctioned execution of a person as punishment for a crime. It's one of the oldest forms of legal punishment, historically used in almost every civilization. Capital punishment refers to the execution of an individual by the state after a legal trial, typically for serious crimes known as capital offenses such as murder, treason, espionage, and terrorism. Arguments for capital punishment. Number one, deterrence. Belief that fear of death discourages people from committing serious crimes. Number two, retribution. An eye for an eye. Justice is served when punishment fits the crime. Number three, closure for victims' families. Offers a sense of justice or closure to the families of the victims. Number four, prevention. Guarantees that dangerous criminals cannot reoffend.
Cannot be what?
Reoffend. Basically recommit the sins.
They won't commit the same thing twice.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then
that's not always sure, but go ahead.
And then cost. In some countries, long-term imprisonment costs more than execution.
Yeah, he's having like a good time, being fed every day and doesn't have to work.
Yeah. And then arguments against capital punishment. One is the risk of wrongful execution. Innocent people have been sentenced to death occasionally. Number two, ineffective deterrence. Studies show that it may not prevent crime better than life imprisonment.
That's nonsense.
Number three, moral and ethical concerns. Many argue taking life is inherently wrong, regardless of the crime.
Oh, that's not right. That's a wrong concept.
Argument. Number four, bias and inequality often disproportionately applied to minorities, the poor, and marginalized communities. And then number five is international human rights. Many global organizations like the UN oppose it.
It's nonsense. UN is nonsense.
So apparently globally there's about 70% of the countries do not have this practice. Basically they abolished it.
Abolished capital punishment.
Yeah.
Look what it says here. The punishment awarded by the state or by God for one's own faults is actually for one's benefit. In the Manu Samhita, it is said that the king should be considered merciful when he condemns a murderer to death, because a murderer punished in this life becomes freed from his sinful activities and in the next life takes birth cleared of all sins. If one accepts punishment as a reward dealt by the master, he becomes intelligent enough not to commit the same mistake again. So you see, they got it all wrong. It's all because of these nonsense people. Go ahead.
And then currently active in countries like China, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and US. In US, only 27 states allow it, it seems.
Okay.
So that's kind of the some of the information. And religious views wise, Christianity has mixed views. Jesus taught forgiveness, but Old Testament allows it. Islam permitted for severe crimes, but mercy is emphasized. Hinduism generally favors nonviolence, but historically allowed in extreme cases. Buddhism generally opposes any killing. So I think, yeah, more and more modern societies are moving away from capital punishment due to human rights concerns.
Okay. But let's see what it says here. It says in the Manu Samhita, it is said that the king should be considered merciful when he condemns a murderer to death, because a murderer punished in this life becomes freed from his sinful activity and in the next life takes birth cleared of all sins. If one accepts punishment as a reward, I like that, as a reward dealt by the master, he becomes intelligent enough not to commit the same mistake again. So uh, the wimpy people that don't want capital punishment is actually not good. Text 22. My dear slender maiden, when a master chastises his servants, the servant should accept this as great mercy. Well, let's look at this statement. When a master chastises his servant, he doesn't beat him up. He just chastises him to correct a mistake. But there are a lot of masters that actually beat and sometimes even kill their servants if they feel that the servant is not doing the right thing. That's not good. One who becomes angry must be very foolish not to know that such is the duty of his friend. So one who becomes angry must be very foolish not to know that such is the duty of his friend. Yeah. Well, when someone makes a mistake and people are not upset about that, that's not good. And it just gives more impetus of the person to continue making mistakes. So one who becomes angry must be very foolish not to know that such is the duty of his friend. Yeah. So a real friend will get angry when someone is engaged in nonsense activity. It is said that when a foolish man is instructed in something very nice, he generally cannot accept it. Indeed, he actually becomes angry. Such anger is compared to the poison of a serpent. For when a serpent is fed milk and bananas, its poison actually increases. Instead of becoming merciful or sober, the serpent increases its poisonous venom when fed nice foodstuffs. Similarly, when a fool is instructed, he does not rectify himself, but actually becomes angry. Yeah, so when we are uh, we are instructed for making mistakes, if someone is a fool, instead of rectifying himself, he actually becomes angry. It doesn't take the good advice. There's a lot of people like that. Too many people like that. Text 23. My dear wife, your teeth are very beautifully set, and your attractive features make you appear very thoughtful. Kindly give up your anger. Be merciful upon me, and please smile upon me with loving attachment. When I see a smile on your beautiful face, and when I see your hair, which is as beautiful as the color blue, and see your raised nose and hear your sweet talk, you will become more beautiful to me and thus attract me and oblige me. You are my most respected mistress. Well, this is the statement of a henpecked man.
Mhm.
He's completely surrendering to the uh, what you would call the body of the woman, not to the heart of the woman or to the soul of the woman. He doesn't see her spiritual, uh, let's say, qualities. He is only looking at her material qualities. Does it say anything spiritual about the woman? He's only seeing her body. Purport of Srila Prabhupada. Let's see what he says. An effeminate husband, that means a man that acts more like a woman than a man. That's why it says effeminate. Simply being attracted by the external beauty of his wife, tries to become her most obedient servant. Sripad Sankaracharya has therefore advised that we not become attracted by a lump of flesh and blood. See that is describing a woman. She's a lump of flesh and blood. The story is told at one time a man, very much attracted to a beautiful woman, wooed the woman in such a way that she devised a plan to show him the ingredients of her beauty. this, this is a great story. The woman made a date to see him, and before seeing him, she took a purgative, which means passing stool and urine uh, and basically uh, continuing for a period of time doing that. And that whole day and night, she simply passed stool and she preserved that stool in a pot. The next night, when the man came to see her, she appeared very ugly and emaciated, very thin. When the man inquired from her about when the man inquired from her about the woman with whom he had an engagement, she replied, I am that very woman. The man refused to believe her, not knowing that she had lost all her beauty due to the violent purgative, meaning the medicine that she took to throw up and pass stool that caused her to pass stool day and night. When the man began to argue with her, the woman said that she was not looking beautiful because she was separated from the ingredients of her beauty. Huh. Okay, here comes the atomic bomb. When the man asked how she could be so separated, the woman said, "Come on, I will show you." She's going to show him where her beauty went. She then showed him the pot filled with liquid stool and vomit. Oh my God. Thus, the man became aware that a beautiful woman is simply a lump of matter composed of blood, stool, urine, and similar other disgusting ingredients. This is the actual fact, but in a state of illusion, man becomes attracted by illusory beauty and becomes a victim of Maya. 100% truthful statement here. King Puranjana begged his wife to return to her original beauty. He tried to revive her, just as a living entity tries to revive his original consciousness, Krishna consciousness, which is very beautiful. All the beautiful features of the queen could be compared to the beautiful features of Krishna consciousness. When one returns to his original Krishna consciousness, he actually becomes steady and his life becomes successful. Okay, my dear friends, if you want to be successful, here is the what you would call advice how to become successful. Take up Krishna consciousness seriously. You will be successful. Not necessarily in making more money, but you'll be successful in preparing yourself to go back to Godhead, which is worth much more than simply making money. Money can come and go, but going back to Godhead is permanent and completely, let's say, uh, completely beneficial. Text 24. O hero's wife, kindly tell me if someone has offended you. I am prepared to give such a person punishment as long as he does not belong to the Brahmana caste. But for the servant of Murai Ripu, or Krishna, it's another name of Krishna, Muraripu, I excuse no one within or beyond these three worlds. So, in other words, he only excuses Krishna if things don't seem to be going right, but nobody else. No one can freely move after offending you, for I am prepared to punish him. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. According to Vedic civilization, a Brahmana, or one who is properly qualified to understand the absolute truth, that is, one belonging to the most intelligent social order, as well as the devotee of the Lord, who is known as Muradvisa, enemy of a demon named Mura, is not subject to the rules and regulations of the state. In other words, upon breaking the laws of the state, everyone can be punished by the government except the Brahmanas and Vaishnavas. Brahmanas and Vaishnavas never transgress the laws of the state or the laws of nature because they know perfectly well the resultant reactions caused by such law breaking. So, Brahmanas and Vaishnavas never transgress the laws of the state or the laws of nature. So, there are two sets of laws. I mean, many people don't understand this. There are actually two sets of laws that we have to follow. One is the laws of the state. They're mundane laws, but still you have to follow them because if you violate them, you get punished. But even more important are the laws of nature. But the laws of nature are the laws given by Krishna himself. So we have two sets of laws that we have to follow, not just one set. Even though they may sometimes appear to violate the laws, they are not to be punished by the king. This instruction was given to King Parsinabharisat by Narada Muni. King Puranjana was a representative of King Parsinabharisat, and Narada Muni was reminding King Parsinabharisat of his forefather, Maharaj Prithu, who never chastised a Brahmana or Vaishnava. Well, one's pure intelligence or pure Krishna consciousness becomes polluted by material activities. Pure consciousness can be revived by the process of sacrifice, charity, pious activities, etc. But when one pollutes his Krishna consciousness by offending a Brahmana or a Vaishnava, it is very difficult to revive. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has described the Vaishnava aparada, or offense to a Vaishnava, as the mad elephant offense. The mad elephant offense. It's when the elephant enters a garden which has nice flowers and all different types of decorative things, and the elephant destroys everything. So the mad elephant offense is to offend a Vaishnava. One should be very careful not to offend a Vaishnava or a Brahmana. Even the great yogi Durvasa was harassed by Sudarshana Chakra when he offended the Vaishnava Maharaj Ambarisha, who was neither a Brahmana nor a sannyasi, but an ordinary householder. Maharaj Ambarisha was a Vaishnava, and consequently Durvasa Muni was chastised. The Durvasa Muni was a very powerful person. He could even go to the spiritual world if he wanted to, which he did, trying to get away from the Sudarshan Chakra that was chasing him because he had insulted Maharaj Ambarisha, who was a genuine Vaishnava. And because of that, Durvasa Muni was severely chastised. The conclusion is that if Krishna consciousness is covered by material sins, one can eliminate the sins simply by chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, Haribol. But if one pollutes his Krishna consciousness by offending a Brahmana or a Vaishnava, one cannot revive it until one properly atones for the sin by pleasing the offended Vaishnava or Brahmana. This was the course that Durvasa Muni had to follow, for he surrendered unto Maharaj Ambarisha, who previously tried to kill. A Vaishnava aparada cannot be atoned for by any means other than begging the pardon of the offended Vaishnava. Yeah, Durvasa Muni was a very powerful person. He was able to go even to the heavenly planets, but no one would help him become free from being chased by this Sudarshan Chakra that was that was going to kill him.
Mhm.
And he had to eventually go back to the person that he insulted, meaning Maharaj Ambarisha, and beg mercy from him to stop this Sudarshan Chakra from killing him. And here it says, a Vaishnava aparada cannot be atoned for by any means other than by begging the pardon of the offended Vaishnava. It's a very important statement. We should never offend anyone, but especially never offend a Vaishnava. And there's no way to become free of that offense unless you go back to that Vaishnava and beg mercy. And this was what Durvasa Muni learned. He tried to get away. Durvasa Muni was a very powerful person. He could go even to the heavenly planets and even above. And he did, but no one could help him get free from being chased by the Sudarshan Chakra. The only thing that helped him was when he went back to Ambarish Maharaj and begged for forgiveness for the offense that he made to him. A Vaishnava aparada cannot be atoned for by any means other than begging the pardon of the offended Vaishnava. That's what we learned from the story of Durvasa Muni. Durvasa Muni was so powerful that he could go to the spiritual world, even, and obviously to all uh, the heavenly planets, but he had to go back to uh, Maharaj Ambarisha, who he insulted, to beg pardon. He was not able to get any shelter, even in the spiritual world. Text 25. My dear wife, until this day, I have never seen your face without tilaka, decorations, nor have I seen you so morose and without luster or affection. Nor have I seen your two nice breasts, wet with tears from your eyes. Nor have I ever before seen your lips, which are ordinarily as red as the bimba fruit, without their reddish hue. All artificial things about the body of a woman. Purport. Every woman looks very beautiful when decorated with tilaka and vermilion, which is a reddish type of powder. A woman generally becomes very attractive when her lips are colored with reddish saffron or vermilion. But when one's consciousness and intelligence are without any brilliant thoughts about Krishna, they become morose and lusterless, so much so that one cannot derive any benefit despite sharp intelligence. Okay, so women generally become very attractive when her lips are colored with reddish saffron or vermilion, but when one's consciousness and intelligence are without any brilliant thoughts about Krishna, they become morose and lusterless, so much so that one cannot derive any benefit despite sharp intelligence. So the real beauty of a woman is her, what you would call her service, engagement to Krishna. Then she becomes very beautiful. When she's decorated with tilaka and vermilion, but when she's engaged in devotional service, then she becomes very attractive. If she is just uh, attractive due to cosmetics, that is not real beauty. Real beauty is a devotee woman who is fully surrendered to Krishna and engaged in devotional service. And that's why it says here that when one's consciousness and intelligence are without any brilliant thoughts about Krishna, they become morose and lusterless, so much so that one cannot derive any benefit despite sharp intelligence. So, without being Krishna conscious, your knowledge, your physical attraction, everything is basically useless. But if you become Krishna conscious, even the most ugly person becomes very attracted by their pure love for Krishna. Okay, text 26. My dear Queen, due to my sinful desires, I went to the forest to hunt without asking you. Therefore, I must admit that I have offended you. Nonetheless, thinking of me as your most intimate subordinate, you should still be very much pleased with me. Factually, I am very much bereaved, but being pierced by the arrow of Cupid, I am feeling lusty. But where is the beautiful woman who would give up her lusty husband and refuse to unite with him? Well, this is implying that a woman likes to have a lusty husband, but that is not actually true. Yeah, a low class woman, yes, maybe, but not a genuine devotee woman. Let's see what Prabhupada says. Both man and women, and what both man and woman desire one another. That is the basic principle of material existence. Women, in general, always keep themselves beautiful so that they can be attractive to their lusty husbands. When a lusty husband comes before his wife, the wife takes advantage of his aggressive activities and enjoys life. Generally, when a woman is attacked by a man, whether her husband or some other man, she enjoys the attack being too lusty. Now, see, that's a very, very, what you would call, uh, very, very uh, difficult statement for some women to accept. And uh, they're right not to accept it because who wants to be attacked by a lusty man? Definitely not as a proper lady. So to say that she enjoys the attack being too lusty, well, yes, a lusty woman would enjoy a man who is more physically uh, attacking her for sex, but most women don't like it. In other words, when one's intelligence is properly utilized, both the intellect and the intelligent person enjoy one another with great satisfaction. As stated in Srimad Bhagavatam, Yan Maitunadi Grihamedi Sukam Hitucham Kandu Yanena Karayor Iva Dukkha Dukam. The actual happiness of the karmis is sex life. They work very hard outside the home. And to satiate their hard labor, they come home to enjoy sex life. King Puranjan went to the forest to hunt, and after his hard labor, he returned home to enjoy sex life. If a man lives outside the home, and spends a week in a city or somewhere else. At the end of the week, he becomes very anxious to return home and enjoy sex with his wife. This is confirmed in Srimad Bhagavatam. Yan Maitunadi Grihamedi Sukam Hitucham. Karmis work very hard simply to enjoy sex. Modern human society has improved the materialistic way of life simply by inducing unrestricted sex life in many different ways. This is most prominently visible in the Western world. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the fourth chapter, 26th chapter, the fourth canto, 26th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled King Puranjana Goes to the Forest to Hunt and his queen becomes angry. Okay, so let's look at some of these statements here. Yan Maitunadi Grihamedi Sukam Hitucham. Karmis work very hard simply to enjoy sex. Modern human society has improved the materialistic way of life simply by inducing unrestricted sex life in many different ways. This is most prominently visible in the Western world. Okay, I mean, that's a completely true statement. However, let's look at this, something else here. Both man and woman desire one another. That is a basic principle of material existence. Women, in general, always keep themselves beautiful so that they can be attractive to their lusty husbands. When a lusty husband comes before his wife, the wife takes advantage of his aggressive activities and enjoys life. Well, not always. Sometimes women do not like their husband being very aggressive. In general, maybe a younger woman may like that, but after she has 3 or 4 or 5 kids, she's not so attracted because it means that she'll get pregnant again and have another child. Generally, when a woman is attacked by a man, whether her husband or some other man, she enjoys the attack being too lusty. Now, I don't really know how many women really like to be attacked by a lusty man, but obviously there are, because we hear about so many women that are involved in situations like that. But there are women that will not accept that type of behavior. Those are spiritually engaged women. In other words, when one's intelligence is properly utilized, both the intellect and the intelligent person enjoy one another with great satisfaction. Well, that is people who are intelligent. As stated in Srimad Bhagavatam, Yan Maitunadi Grihamedi Sukam Hitucham Kandu Yanena Karayor Eva Dukkha Dukkam. The actual happiness of the karmis is sex life. Okay, so that's true. They work very hard outside the home, and to satiate their hard labor, they come home to enjoy sex life. That's absolutely true. King Puranjan went to the forest to hunt, and after his hard labor, he returned home to enjoy sex life. Well, that means Puranjan was a karmi. If a man lives outside the home and spends a week in a city or somewhere else, at the end of the week, he becomes very anxious to return home and enjoy sex with his wife. Well, that's generally true. This is confirmed in Srimad Bhagavatam, Yan Maitunadi Grihamedi Sukam Hitucham. Karmis work very hard simply to enjoy sex. Modern human society has improved the materialistic way of life simply by inducing unrestricted sex life. How can that be considered an improvement? it is for the karmis. By inducing unrestricted sex life in many different ways. This is most prominently visible in the Western world. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the fourth canto, 26th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled King Puranjan goes to the forest to hunt, and his queen becomes angry. Well, our major takeaway here and let's say that there are statements here made by Prabhupada that may be contested by some women. But anyway, it says, generally when a woman is attacked by a man, whether her husband or some other man, she enjoys the attack being too lusty. In other words, when one's intelligence is properly utilized, both the intellect and the intelligent person enjoy one another with great satisfaction. Okay, so this is very important to understand. Prabhupada says, on one hand, when a woman is attacked by a man, whether her husband or some other man, she enjoys the attack being too lusty. In other words, when one's intelligence is properly utilized, both the intellect and the intelligent person enjoy one another with great satisfaction. And this is explained in the Srimad Bhagavatam 7.9.45. Well, when it says the woman enjoys the attack being too lusty, but there are many, many women, such as devotee women and others, that do not like to be attacked by a lusty man. And Prabhupada says, in other words, when one's intelligence is properly utilized, both the intellect and the intelligent person enjoy one another with great satisfaction.
So that statement, how is that? I mean, it's Prabhupada writes a previous statement, which is
aggressive activities.
Yeah, and then he's saying, in other words, when one's intelligence is properly utilized. Well, this statement by itself is right, but how is this the paraphrasing of the previous?
Well, the main statement is, in other words, when one's intelligence is properly utilized, both the intellect and the intelligent person enjoy one another with great satisfaction. And then he quotes this verse, Yan Maitunadi Gahimedi, etc. The actual happiness of the karmis is sex life. They work very hard outside the home, and to satiate their hard labor, they come home to enjoy sex life. That's not the life of a devotee, though. The life of a devotee is that he controls his sex life with his wife and limits it for procreation of good children. So this is talking completely about a lusty man and lusty woman who cannot control their senses and engage in extra sexual activities outside of wanting to have a child. That's why it says the actual happiness of the karmis is sex life. And in order to have more and more sex life, they use different strategies to avoid getting the wife pregnant. That's not spiritual life. That's the life of the demons. And when it says, after hard labor, the man comes home to enjoy sex life, those are really low-class men. So, Puranjan is acting like a low-class man. And after he finishes hunting in the forest, killing animals, which is really sinful, and after his hard labor, he returned home to enjoy sex life. Well, that would be the culture of a really low class person. Being a hunter and killing animals is sinful, and coming home after that and having sex is even more sinful. And that's actually illicit sex. It's not sex for procreation. So it says King Puranjan went to the forest to hunt, and after his hard labor, he returned home to enjoy sex life. If a man lives outside the home and spends a week in a city or somewhere else, at the end of the week, he becomes very anxious to return home and enjoy sex with his wife. That's true of all the karmis. This is confirmed in Srimad Bhagavatam. Karmis work very hard simply to enjoy sex. That is an absolutely correct statement. But that's about karmis. Modern human society has improved the materialistic way of life simply by inducing unrestricted sex life in many different ways. This is most prominently visible in the Western world. Okay, well, these are all statements about men and women that can't control their senses and their minds. And these statements are correct. They're not exaggerated. Okay, so I think we will stop here. What time is it? It's 7:35. 7:40. Are there any questions anyone would like to ask or comments? Any
Hare
questions?
Krishna Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. I have a question. So, uh, so the two. So, if we have offended any Vaishnavas unknowingly, then what do we do? And even if we have offended a normal karmi, but later on they become Vaishnavas, or there is a third scenario where it's a close family member, or as a mother you chastise your child and then you have offended. So all these three four scenarios, how how to get out of this mad elephant and progress in Krishna consciousness, because the like sometimes we interact with devotees and non-devotees and we can offend them knowingly or unknowingly.
Well, why would you want to offend anyone? That's really, that means it's a lack of Krishna consciousness when you offend someone. That's why a devotee is always very careful not to offend anyone, including an animal. Right? So if we do offend someone, the only way to become free from that uh, karmic reaction is to beg the mercy of that person that has been offended and ask them to forgive.
But if we don't know, because sometimes we chastise a child and a child could be Vaishnav or somebody we chastise, if we have not been careful in the past, this has happened in the past, so how do we handle this? The only way is to ask forgiveness, so then we go around and ask forgiveness from everyone, because sometimes we say something and someone can get offended unknowingly.
You will not offend someone knowingly or unknowingly if you're always chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, and follow the regulative principles: no meat eating, no gambling, no illicit sex, no intoxication. You won't really offend anyone. It's when we have, in other words, it's when we loosen our uh, determination to strictly follow Krishna consciousness that we may offend people. So we have to be very careful about chanting our rounds every day. 16 good rounds, not rounds not trying to do 3 or 4 things at the same time while chanting. We have to be completely focused on hearing the holy names of the Lord, which means we should never chant silently. We should always chant loud enough that we can hear ourselves the mantra Hare Krishna, and someone near us also can hear it. That eliminates silent chanting. So if you actually do chant every day 16 good rounds with meditation on the holy names, you will avoid almost all problems in life. And the problems that do appear, you'll be able to tolerate them because you have completely surrendered to Krishna. And therefore, you are very patient, and your tolerance level is very, very great. For people who are not really following strictly the principles of Krishna consciousness, their tolerance level is very, very low. Mm. But someone who is actually following Krishna consciousness very strictly and very sincerely, they have a tremendous tolerance, let's say, ability. And even if they're insulted or even physically harmed, they're very tolerant. Of course, we don't want to be physically harmed, but sometimes it happens. But a devotee is always merciful and can accept, just like you look at uh, in this purport today, it says, the actual happiness of the karmis is sex. Well, obviously, he's not talking about devotees. He's talking about karmis. They work very hard outside the home to satiate or satisfy their hard labor. Then they come home to enjoy sex life. Well, that's not the life of a devotee. A devotee avoids sex life. He only engages in sex in order to procreate a child. And after that, zero, nada, finished. So a person who has that control and that determination to follow the regulative principles of Krishna consciousness is very happy and is always cheerful in chanting Hare Krishna and helping other people become Krishna conscious. Okay, so the problem is in modern society today, there's so much what you would call uh, so much uh, people focusing on sex life. And there are books, there are movies, there are so many different ways people inadvertently or advertently come into contact with sexual, let's say, situations and sexual knowledge and books and movies, etc. So a devotee has to make a decision in his or her life to avoid all these modern ways of being introduced to sex life. And that means that we shouldn't be watching television or going to the movies or associating with people who have, uh, a wanton life of sex enjoyment. We have to be very careful who we associate with. We have to be very careful with what going to movies or hearing discussions about sex and associating with people who are addicted to sex life. So the life of a devotee is very restricted. And the people that we associate with should only be devotees, not with karmis. We may work with the karmis, but not share in their escapades of their different vacations and their different this and that. We have to be aloof from uh, associating with unholy people. So none of the statements made here by Prabhupada, none of them are wrong. They're all correct statements. Now, here's the question. Now we've been reading, the Bhagavatam now, this Canto 4. There is a lot of references to illicit activities. Why is that? Well, because unless we become free of this meditation on sex life, we will become fools for the rest of our life. We have to understand the pitfalls of life. And the main pitfall, the main thing that can stop us from being Krishna conscious is engaging in illicit sexual activities. Immediately, it will destroy your spiritual life. Immediately. And it could take you many, many years to rehabilitate yourself and get free of that, let's say, that taste or that type of activity. So that's why so much importance is given in many, many places in this fourth canto. It's talking a lot about man-woman relationship. So if it's talking so much about that, sometimes people say, well, why is there so much dwelling on the man-woman relationship? Why don't we talk about other things that don't touch lust, anger, greed, and so forth? Well, because uh, if there's a person who doesn't want to hear anything about the man-woman relationship, they can be fooled to violate the rules and regulations of Krishna consciousness because they're not educated then. You have to know both sides of life, the good side and the bad side, not just only the good side. You have to know both sides so that you don't make a mistake inadvertently by ignorance. That's why, uh, let's say when there is a construction site, there are signs, beware, right? Or you go, let's say, hiking, and there's signs, beware of bears. So they're warning you, look, you're in a dangerous area. And if you want to, take the risk of walking through this forest or whatever, you have to know that there are bears and there are snakes and there are so many things. So you're doing it at your own risk, right? So a devotee will avoid all risky situations. Why be tempted by walking through places where there is unabashed sex going on? We should stay away from that completely. Okay, so are there any questions or comments?
So, Maharaj, you said devotee will avoid such risky places. So
Yeah.
does it mean like they should avoid going like deep forest or like hiking where there is a risk? Some places are okay; they're pretty common. Like a lot of people are there, but some places are slightly isolated. But still, some people go. So that's the point that you're saying.
Not only that, you have to avoid the association of unholy people. That's the worst thing you can do, is to associate with unholy people. Because they make illicit activities seem normal. Eating meat, gambling, intoxication, and illicit sex. They make it look like it's a normal thing to do. And it's very bad to be in the association of such people. Okay, thank you very much, my dear devotees. Please chant Hare Krishna today and meditate on what we have heard today. What is our takeaway? Yan maitunadi grihamedi sukham hitucham. Karmis work very hard simply to enjoy sex. Modern society has improved the materialistic way of life simply by inducing unrestricted sex life in many different ways. This is most prominently visible in the Western world. Well, we are raising our children in the Western world. So obviously, and especially if you put them into public schools, even private schools, with children from non-devotee families and so forth, it's very risky, very, very risky, because your kids are going to come in contact with all kinds of other kids who don't have the same values that we do, meaning Krishna conscious values. So it is actually child abuse putting your child in a school where there are many kids who are not spiritually inclined and teachers who are not spiritually inclined. So you're taking a huge risk, and it's a form of child abuse by putting your child in that type of an atmosphere. So therefore, you should protect your children by not putting them in those horrible schools where Prabhupada calls them slaughterhouses. That's what they are, actually, slaughterhouses of spiritual consciousness. Yeah. Okay, well, you can meditate on that today, and we can talk about it some more. All glories to Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama.